I'm sorry that we've started late. Technological problems. It's perhaps the case that technology is labour-saving. When you try and sort it out, it does take time. It is actually quite reassuring to know that we can manage without it, and we're going to do that this morning until the ordinary service is restored, and it won't affect what is happening. The technological problem at the moment is in relation to the provision of document images, and Ms. Richards has agreed to work around that. So that's what we shall do. Before we begin with my making an anonymity order for Mr. W, let me just raise something with you, Ms. Richards, arising out of yesterday's testimony. Do we have something to report as to a response to what was being said?
Yes, sir. Sorry, it was my omission yesterday. When Mr. and Mrs. V were giving their evidence, I should have mentioned then that Dr. Lowe has been asked to respond to the matters raised in their statements and is proposing to respond. And once received, that response will be published in due course.
Thank you very much. So back to Mr. W. Again, it's a restriction order to preserve anonymity. Now, because it will be very difficult for Mr. W to avoid mentioning some names, family names, in the course of his evidence, there will be no live streaming. The transcript will be edited to avoid any conflict, any compromising of his anonymity later. And so you will hear it and hear it here, but the world out there won't for the moment. The order is as follows. The name and address of witness W2781, that's Mr. W to you and me, the name of his wife who died, and the name of any other member of the witness's family, and any other identifying information, such as the witness's image or a description of their appearance, cannot be disclosed or published in any form unless express permission is given by me or by the Secretary to the Inquiry acting on my behalf. The Solicitor to the Inquiry, I'm sorry, acting on my behalf. Witness W2781 must be referred to only as Mr. W. The order remains in force for the duration of the inquiry and at all times thereafter unless otherwise ordered. And I may vary or revoke the order by making a further order during the course of the inquiry. Well, with that introduction, may we have Mr. W, please.
Mr. W, your full name is known to the inquiry. Could you please repeat after me? I do solemnly, sincerely.
I do solemnly, sincerely.
And truly declare and affirm.
And truly declare and affirm.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Mr. W, you're here to talk about your late wife.
Yes.
And we're going to name in the course of your evidence because it would not be easy for you to give your evidence about her without naming her. So those in the room will hear her name, but that name is not to be reported or published or disclosed in any respect. And you've shown us two beautiful photographs of one of you and on your wedding day and another of you and in 1986, which the chair has seen and which I have seen, but which, because of the anonymity order, we won't be showing more generally. But thank you for sharing those photographs with us. You met in 1976 and married in 1978.
Yes.
And so was a civil servant with the Department of Health.
Yes.
What was she like as a person?
Outgoing, lovely. wonderful. A very, very nice person.
She'd had kidney problems for some years.
Yeah, since she was in her teens, yeah.
And that gradually got worse and worse.
Yes.
Although that didn't stop her from living her life to the full.
Oh, no, not at all. No, no.
But around May of 1984, she started to require regular dialysis.
Yes.
And what did that entail?
Well, it entailed having to go down to the hospital at least 3 or 4 times a week. And that was a round trip of 120 miles. And then they decided they were going to put a unit in the back garden. And they were just actually in the process of doing that, putting a unit in the back garden. And I was getting trained up to actually use a dialysis machine to look after it. And obviously when a kidney became available.
Because she'd been put on the transplant list.
Straight away, yeah.
And then in September 1984, she received a call about a donor kidney having become available. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, we're just at home one day, just sitting watching the television. Phone rang, I answered it, and it was the hospital in Manchester to say. They told me straight away, get your wife down straight away, there's a kidney available. But we've got to talk to her first. I put her on the phone, and she agreed straight away, and that was it. We just jumped in the car and drove all the way down to Manchester.
And that the kidney was a match?
But yeah.
As far as you understood?
As far as we understood, yeah.
And the operation proceeded and was seemingly successful?
Oh, yeah, and as much as, obviously, when she came out the operation, I was told she would be sleeping for a good few hours, so I just went home, came back, and when I came back, it was an entirely different lady.
You've said in your statement you saw her the morning after you visited her and she looked absolutely fantastic.
Oh, yeah, brilliant.
She looked
yeah.
well and you were both so happy.
Yeah, yeah.
And you thought that she would be able to get on and lead a normal life without requiring the regular ongoing dialysis.
Yeah, that's what we were told. Just she would have to take anti-rejection drugs, but obviously she accepted that anyway. And just to get on with life after that. But she was absolutely brilliant. It was a fantastic success. And you've really got to thank the health service for what they've done. That was just brilliant.
But health then began to decline. What kind of symptoms did she begin to experience?
I keep thinking back how long ago it was since the operation till she started that. Just weeks coming to my mind, 4 to 5 weeks, she started not feeling well. And as much as she went to see her own doctor, and he said, I can't do anything, you'll have to get in touch with the hospital. I got in touch with the hospital, went down to see them, and they said, we'll have to take her in, it's like she's got pneumonia. Plus, she just wasn't well at all. When they took her in, one of the doctors just mentioned that they thought that a flu-type virus had actually come with the kidney, but they were treated as such. And of course, you're just thinking, flu-type virus, that's a couple of hours, didn't go to bed, and you'll be okay. You're not thinking it because you don't know anything else.
She didn't get better. She was starting to experience lethargy and fatigue, a loss of weight, loss of appetite.
Massive loss of weight, yeah. Her arms and her legs got very, very thin. She started coming out in spots, and the spots turned into blisters. She was just a complete mess, if you will, just an entirely different lady whatsoever.
And she started to get repeat infections?
All the time, yeah. I was back and forward to the hospital all the time. I didn't seem to be away from Manchester at all.
And then there was an occasion in July of 1986, the end of July, when brother had taken her into the hospital for an appointment.
Yeah, the reason that happened was because I worked a 3-shift, 7-day system on where I was working. And it happened to be that day. We just thought it was a checkup she was going for. I couldn't possibly be in there, so her brother, he volunteered to take her down. He took her down to the hospital, and when she came back, it was about, I just actually got into bed in the afternoon, and she came upstairs breaking her heart.
What did she tell you?
Sorry.
Take as much time as you need, and I can take it from your statement if that would be easier.
Her actual words were, "You're not going to believe this, but I've got HIV." HIV, of course, I was sort of half awake. And HIV, what are you talking about? You've got HIV. How's that possible? Because all we knew about HIV then was it was a gay plague. That's what we were told. That's what everybody was told. And of course, I thought, oh, God, well, you're not thinking of it. And she went, no, she said, it's not. I've got HIV and we've got to phone Dr. Ackroll straight away. And you've got to go down there. And he's going to explain things further. And of course, I phoned Dr. Ackroll and he said, could you come down? I was actually due back in at work to do another shift. And I phoned my bosses and they covered up and said, don't worry, just go. We got down to the hospital. Dr. Ackroll was waiting there and he said, we've got to take a blood test off you straight away to see if you've got HIV. And of course, I'm thinking, you're not thinking HIV. Well, I don't care. Just find out what's happening, what's going on. He took the blood and I said, oh, this will take a few days. He went, no. He said, this will take an hour. We've got everything standing by waiting for you to do an HIV test. Still not taking things in. And he came back and he said, we're lucky you haven't got it, which was a great relief. And I started crying because she thought she'd infected me because we made love during that period of time when I obviously were a couple. And she was so frightened that she had passed it on to me, and she was so relieved that she hadn't.
And at this stage, you and she still did not know how she had become infected with HIV?
No.
Can you recall what, if any, advice or information the doctors were able to give you about the condition?
All we were told was, the first thing we were told was, for your own good, don't tell anybody. Because of the stigma that's attached to this. We don't want you going down that road. We don't want you two to be stigmatised as your wife having HIV. And of course you're taking it and think, oh yeah, he's right. We don't want this. Why should we be stigmatised? Or why should she be stigmatised for having this through no fault of her own? And it was a couple of weeks after that, we had to go back to the hospital again. And Dr. Ackroll was sitting there, and the other, I'm not sure of the other doctor, and he was more worried about if we told anybody. He said, have you told anybody? And she said, no, we haven't told anybody. Don't even tell your family. Still not thinking anything of it. But it was about 6 weeks after that, we hadn't told any of the family, but our family started thinking she had cancer. And once word of that got back to me, I said, this is wrong. We shouldn't be having to go through this. Why should we have to lie to your family through something that's no fault of your own? And they think you've got cancer. This was what our brother was saying. We think she's got cancer. What's wrong with her? And I said, I'll come round. And the both of us went around to her parents' house and she sat down. She got her mum on the run and told her. And then she told the rest of the family what she had, but we still didn't know how she got it.
And you said in your statement that you didn't understand what the HIV meant. Little seemed to be known about it apart from what you'd picked up from gay plague and tombstone adverts on TV.
Well, that wasn't then. Those adverts weren't sort of out then. They were just on the throes of coming out. Every hospital visit, the first thing they always asked was, have you told anybody? And when she did say she told her family, I forget this other doctor's name, he was quite upset about it because we'd actually spoke to other people about it. And then she started getting angry. That's when she started thinking. And then she said, how exactly did I get this HIV? And she was told then it actually came from the cadaver. It came from the guy that gave his organs. So that automatically made us think he had HIV, not thinking that he had got it any other way, because we didn't know. And that's all we were told. So even weeks after that, we still believed that he was the actual one that gave the HIV.
We've got a letter that was written by the Manchester Central Hospitals and Community Care NHS Trust some years later in September 1992.
Yeah.
I'm going to see if our systems will allow it to be displayed on the screen now, because we've had some problems, but if not, I'll read it out. So, Paul, the number is 2781002. And I'll read out, because this is an important letter, as you know, I'll read out the relevant paragraphs in any event. Was admitted under my care as a matter of urgency on the 20th of September 1984 for a cadaver renal transplant. She'd been in chronic renal failure for approximately 13 years, and then there's some description of the treatment she'd received. She received the right kidney from, and there's the name of the donor, which obviously we are not going to mention,
No.
aged 23 years, who had died as a result of a road traffic accident and a head injury on the 19th of September 1984. Prior to the removal of the kidney, the donor was tested for hepatitis, HIV, and then another virus that we don't need to concern ourselves with for the purposes of your evidence, and was found to be negative for all three. The transplant took place on the 20th of September. The match was almost perfect, with only one measured mismatch at A3 on the HLA locus. And then it says was also tested for hepatitis and HIV and was negative. The letter continues to talk about her progress in terms of the recovery from the transplant, and then becoming ill and testing positive for HIV. And then the letter continues as follows. Suffice it to say, we then went back to look at the donor to see whether or not that was the source of infection. And it transpired that one of the units of blood given to the donor during the course of his resuscitation had subsequently been shown to come from an HIV-positive donor. This was 1 unit of blood in a transfusion of 15 units of blood, necessitated by his injuries caused in the road traffic accident. We then reviewed the other recipients of the donor's organs and found that the recipient of the other kidney, one of our patients, had also converted to HIV positivity, and the recipients of his liver and heart, respectively, had also converted to positivity. In conclusion, there is absolutely no doubt that HIV infection was transmitted via her kidney transplant from the donor, and that the origin of the infection was from a positive blood transfusion given to him in resuscitation. So you learnt subsequently that the donor himself had not been HIV positive, but he had been given HIV-infected blood during the attempts to resuscitate him following his road traffic accident.
Yes.
And that the recipients of a number of the organs that were donated converted to HIV.
Yes.
It amounts to 5 people given HIV from 1 blood transfusion, plus the
Including
dead
the
man.
donor.
6.
6 people, yeah.
Well, I think we have liver and heart, 2 kidneys, and then the donor. And one of the kidney recipients was...
Yes.
Do you recall whether you were given that particular information during the course of life, or was that something you only discovered subsequently?
Well, we discovered it in 1982 about the other recipients. And one particular recipient sticks in mind, and that was found out herself. I don't know how she found out. She was in hospital in Manchester, and she phoned me one night and said, "You're not going to believe this," she said, "but I've just found out that the guy that was given the donor heart, he was actually told 8 months before he was told about getting HIV virus. 8 months before she was told. I don't know who told her, but she totally believed the person who told her that."
And your statement sets out your understanding indeed, that the other recipient of the other kidney had also died from HIV.
Yeah, we actually knew her very, very well. They were very, very close friends because they had the same problems. It was the same hospital, same ward that we were getting treated in. And as much as once we found out that she had HIV, That was the first thing she asked. She asked, how's the other?
person.
And they said, oh, well, we're not allowed to discuss any other patients. And of course, when she got home, she said, what should I do? I said, the best thing to do, if you are going to phone her, don't mention it. Just see if she mentions it to you, because it's not something you can go and phone up and just ask directly. And she did phone her, and she didn't mention it. So we assumed that she didn't know at that time. And she was probably told, or obviously after she was told. But how long after, we don't know.
The observation you've made in your witness statement is we came in for a life-saving operation and came out with a death sentence.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, to come out with, to go and be, it was such a match, a great match. They were so happy. And for it to end up to be a killer disease, we couldn't understand why it happened. And of course, you start questioning things then. Why wasn't there tests in place? If there was, why weren't they used? If there wasn't tests in place and you knew what was happening, why didn't you wait until tests were in place? It just wasn't making sense whatsoever.
Health continued to deteriorate.
Yeah, greatly, yeah.
You've said in your statement that she prayed that treatment would be developed to help her, but it didn't come in time.
Yeah.
And she knew she was going to die.
Oh, yeah, she knew. It was constant reminders. If you just refer back to those tombstone adverts. It was in papers, it was in billboards, newspapers, television, radios. It was a constant reminder to her. I ended up, she couldn't watch TV. Anything she watched, we had to sort of pre-record on the old tape machine. She'd break her heart every day, and that's... I'm so sorry.
No, that's all right. Take as long as you like.
She'd just see an advert and she'd just say, I'm going to die. What can I do? Just to hold her and just say, not just now. Because she knew she was. She knew she was.
She died July 1987. She was just 33 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was less than 3 years after the transplant.
Yeah. Yeah. And she did suffer. She really, really suffered that 3 years. That particular photograph that I showed you today,
Yeah.
that was the last photograph of us two together. And she was so happy in it because I was holding her, actually holding her up, because her legs were like that and her arms were like that. And she was so sore with the lumps, blisters. It was bad.
There was an inquest into death.
Yeah.
And you've explained in your statement that at the inquest you asked the doctor how long she might have survived with dialysis if she hadn't had the transplant.
Yeah.
And the answer was that she could have gone on for a few more years.
Yes, yes.
You have, you've explained to me that you have had a sense that the doctors were not telling you everything at this time.
Yeah, it was
What do you mean by that?
It was like a sixth sense. One particular doctor, I don't know if I'm allowed to name him or not, he sort of, he'd tell you something and he would sort of go, as if he was saying to you, look, don't believe what I'm saying. And when you sort of asked him something, because he liked him a lot, he was a favourite patient of ours, and I just got the sense he's not telling us the truth. He's not coming across, and he's sorry that he's not able to come across.
And you had a conversation after the inquest with Dr. Ackrill, who's a doctor you're full of praise for in terms of his care. Who told you about something having happened in France, something similar?
Well, it was right after the inquest. We were just coming out the hall, and obviously he had done his thing, and he left the hall. And by the time I got out, he was standing outside, and he was waiting. And I just went up to him and shook his hand, and I thanked him for looking after him. And he just turned around, and he said, his actual words were, this happened 3 years ago, the exact same thing that happened in France 3 years ago. said, I'm not repeating it, and he walked out.
Can I ask you about how you coped and managed after death?
Well, I thought I was coping. I thought I was going to be okay. I was living under false pretenses. I basically just didn't cope at all. I just didn't cope whatsoever. I lost everything, my job, my house. My health deteriorated. Ended up actually with post-traumatic stress disorder as regards to hospitals, which is very, very serious, in as much as I can't even go in a hospital. It's been recognised, in as much as last November I had a massive heart attack. I was taken to hospital, and it was just into the second day I got up out of bed and told them I'm leaving, because I couldn't even hold my head up to look. I was getting dizzy. The consultant came, he'd already read my notes and he understood exactly what was going on. He said, we're agreeing with you, we're going to take it in the side room now and we're going to treat you at home. And I got fantastic care at home. Doctors coming up and nurses coming up at home. I was sorry to be such a burden, but this is what's left me with. This post-traumatic stress disorder, which I couldn't believe that I had.
In lifetime, was she or you ever offered any psychological counselling or support?
No, there was only the once, and it was a few weeks after she was told. Whether it was psychological help or not, I don't know, because we were invited down to, I think it was Wellington, I'm not even sure of the hospital, or it could have been the Victoria Hospital, to go down to talk to somebody. And when we went down there, I had to take time off work. And like I say, it's a round trip, 120 miles. It's not an easy trip. We got down there. This young doctor walked in, who later found out he was an intern. He was just a young doctor in his third or fourth year, and a young nurse. We couldn't find any place to go and have this discussion, and we ended up in the stockroom sitting on the floor. And all he kept saying is, we'll have to educate the staff on how to treat HIV patients. And as you can see, and she was starting to get, she got up and she said, this is a complete and utter waste of time. You're not helping me whatsoever, and I'm not coming back. He said, well, we've got to learn as much as you, but that's all. What you know, we know, that's it.
And in the years since death, have you been offered any support or counselling?
My own doctors, yes. I went to see a couple of psychologists, but the treatment they were wanting to give me, I just couldn't handle it at the time. I felt I wasn't quite ready for it, and I just didn't go back. And the doctors understood. They said, that's okay, we're patient, we'll start it again when you're ready. They've been absolutely marvellous, because they know the full history. And
you remarried, you've had a daughter?
Yes.
And you say in your statement that they have been the support.
Well, the lady that I married, she was actually worked in the medical profession for a few years. And when I first met her, she recognised, I don't know what she recognised, but we got married anyway. And I didn't think that would happen again. I really, really didn't. And of course, that was the silver lining, and this was the other silver lining.
You've mentioned in your statement involvement in some form of litigation in 1992 and having to sign a waiver in order to receive money.
How that came about was, I was in the car and I was driving through the town I was in, and I was just starting to click on Radio 4. I don't know what the programme was. It just mentioned the fact that there had been an agreement with the government for HIV, people that passed away in their families, that there was a compensation order out. And I thought, oh, that'll give me a chance, if I can't get anything, to get back on my feet, because, like I said, I lost absolutely everything. So what I'd done, I phoned up the solicitors that we had in Manchester previous, and it was a Mr. Morton came on the phone, and he said straight away, he said, I'm glad you got back in touch, Mr. I'll dig your files out, but I can't see any problems. And I went, yeah, okay then. The next thing I got a letter from him saying, yeah, there is compensation available, but you'll have to sign a waiver to say that you won't bother the National Health people again as regards your wife's case. And of course I wasn't, well, I thought, well, if I can get some money back, you can put down maybe a little property and get stuck into that, and that'll keep us busy, get us a bit of security back. So I did. I signed the waiver, and a few weeks later, there was a cheque came back through the door. And I don't mind saying what it was for if you need to know.
Well, it's in your statement in any event. So.
Yeah.
Although you've made very clear in your statement how you've rebuilt a life with your wife and your daughter, you've said this, that you still have bad dreams and nightmares.
Yeah.
Regularly, and you'll wake up crying, screaming and sweating.
Oh yeah, and that's 3-4 times a week. Even today, and last night was, well, not too bad. I sort of coped with it, just got up and made myself a cup of tea. And I am a smoker, I'm a heavy smoker, and I shouldn't be, I know that. But I got up last night at the hotel and I went outside and had a cigarette and came back in again, another cup of tea, went to bed, and that helped.
And you've also said in your statement that you promised that you would try and find out what happened.
Yeah, and I didn't want that to be just a bare promise. And I did try after it. I did try, but there's no Google them days. There was nothing, you can just press a button and instant there. You had to go to libraries, you had to phone, to see medical people, and they could close ranks on you and you wouldn't know. You just wouldn't know, so I sort of let it go. And I always felt guilty about doing that. And when this inquiry came up, the previous inquiry, the Penrose inquiry, I just didn't believe in that at all and didn't want to get involved. But when this inquiry came up and I looked into it and I seen what was involved, I totally believe in it. Because I think you're totally looking for the truth. And I totally believe in what you're doing here. That's why I'm here.
Thank you, and I've got no further questions for you, but is there anything else that you would like to say?
No, I've wrote a little statement of sorts. It might sound a bit harmy, but I'd like to read that.
If you want to say it, then absolutely, this is your chance to do so.
Thank you. You'll have to forgive me. Could you just take a minute?
Of course.
It's not a long statement. I would like to thank the inquiry for the care and attention that has shown to myself and my family over the last few months. I cannot believe that I am sitting here giving evidence about horrible events that happened over 30 years ago. So, believe me, if tears were made of ink, then I could write a book about the one poor person who was so cruelly taken from me all those years ago. Please remember, I have no medical training whatsoever. All I do have is some medical knowledge of events at that time. Since then, I have often thought why this terrible disease was ever allowed to infect the thousands of innocent people that it did, as well as the many thousands of relatives and carers who were badly affected by these events. I can only comment on personal medical experience that happened to my wife in the mid to late 1980s. My wife always believed that the whole issue of HIV and AIDS, via transfusion or transplants, etc., could have been avoided if the proper precautions were put in place by the companies who gathered and sold on this blood for massive profit, and blame must go to their customers, one of whom was the British government, who were very lax in not doing checks on the life-giving blood that they were buying from abroad. In my wife's case, we were told that the 1 pint of blood that was passed on to her via kidney transplant did originate from America. We do in this country have a fantastic National Health Service who do brilliant work year in and year out trying to keep us all healthy, regardless of race, creed and colour. They do have safety checks in place with new drugs and treatment before being released to the general public. This has always been the case since the inception of our National Health Service in 1948. I only remember that year because that's the year I was born. I think that our Ministry of Health during at least the 1980s were very complacent in their attitude to the horrors of HIV and AIDS. They chose not to take any action once news began to leak out regarding tainted blood. If action was taken, it was kept very quiet from the people who were infected by this blood. Perhaps they thought that the HIV/AIDS would hopefully go away on its own accord. When it appears that it would not, I think panic set in, and they spent millions on so-called tombstone adverts on television, newspapers, cinemas, billboards, etc., mainly directed at the gay scene. This was, of course, no help to patients who were already infected. In fact, it caused the opposite effect. It just kept reminding them that they had a very short lifespan ahead. This, of course, greatly affected loved ones and carers. Also, my wife and I totally believed that blood tests were available at the time, but for some reason were never used properly. Why was our government so slow in doing anything practical regarding the companies supplying this tainted blood? It can only come down to two things: politics and money. I would and could go on, but would just be repeating what has been said over the years. I do have confidence in this infected blood inquiry, and I'm sure that Sir Brian Langstaff and his team will get to the truth very soon. I write this as a layman, just a normal guy who lost a normal girl. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask Mr. Snowden, who represents you, if there's anything else. No, nothing further. Sir Brian?
I'm not going to ask any questions, but just pick up on a word that you used in what you were saying at the end, which described what had happened when your wife was cruelly taken. We've heard some very disturbing tales in this inquiry. I think few, if any, can be quite as cruel to the sufferer as the story of what happened to your wife, who went in for a life-saving treatment and came out with a death sentence, as you put it.
Yes.
It has not been easy for you to tell us, but I think everyone listening will understand how important it was that you did.
Yes.
So thank you.
Just thank you for giving me the opportunity to get it. It'll help me to get it off my chest.
It's important.
And it should have been told.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
We'll take a break to 11:20.
Thank you, sir.
11:20.